And we're back. The defense called as their final witness Robert Hicks, a police training officer with expertise about satanic crimes. Hicks testified that he knew of no connection between sexual mutilation and the occult. He also told jurors that, quote, we do have empirical evidence, unquote, that listening to Metallica music does not, quote, lead people to commit crimes, unquote. He described the phrase, trappings of the occult, used by prosecution expert Dale Griffiths, as absolutely meaningless in considering any kind of violent crime. That was it. The defense rested. Jason Baldwin never testified, his attorney hoping that his client's low profile and the scant evidence against him would save his client. Quote, we wanted to just disappear on the radar screen and let Damien be the whole focus, unquote. Paul Ford later said, quote, we thought if we didn't stir the pot and they didn't stir the pot, what were they going to convict him on, unquote. On March 17th, the jury listened to closing arguments. John Fogelman argued that while most people might not believe this satanic stuff, what matters is what these defendants believe. Religion, he said, is, quote, a motivating force. It gives people who want to do evil, want to commit murders, a reason to do what they're doing, unquote. Fogelman told jurors that when you, quote, see inside Damien and you look inside there, there's not a soul there, unquote. Because these are clearly experts in what field, I don't know. Damien and Jesse were found guilty of first degree on all of three counts. In her account of the West Memphis case, Devil's Knot, Mara Leverett reports Jesse's reaction, recalled years later, as he heard the verdict announced. Quote, when that verdict came in, I just knew my life was over right then, unquote. In the penalty phase of the trial, the jury decided to sentence Jesse to life in prison without opportunity for parole. Eccles was sentenced to death. Asked by Judge Burnett if he had anything to say before the sentence was imposed, he said, quote, no. Quote. The citing of a black male as a possible alternate suspect was implied during the beginning of the Miss Kelly trial, according to local West Memphis police officers on the evening of May 5th, 1993, at 8:42 p.m., workers in the Bojangles Chicken Restaurant, located about a mile from the crime scene that was in Robin Hood Hills, reported seeing a black male who seemed mentally disoriented inside the restaurant's ladies' room. The man was bleeding and had brushed against the restroom walls. Officer Regina Meeks responded to the call, taking the restaurant manager's report through the eatery's drive-through window. Arkansas. By then, the man had left, and police did not enter the restroom on that date. The day after the victims' bodies were found, Bojangles manager Marty King, thinking there was a possible connection to the bloody man found in the bathroom, reported the incident to police officers who then inspected the ladies' room. The man reportedly wore a blue cast-type brace on his arm that had white Velcro on it, which would have made it difficult to tie up and murder 3 young boys. King gave the officers a pair of sunglasses he thought the man had left behind, and the detectives took some blood samples from the walls and tiles of the restroom. Oh, thank you. Police Detective Brian Ridge testified that he later lost those blood scrapings. Okay. A hair identified as belonging to a black male was later recovered from a sheet wrapped around one of the victims. Now, I found this information on the internet, as you know. I don't know the consequences of this theory, quote unquote. It's mind-blowing. In May 1994, the 3 defendants appealed their convictions. The convictions were upheld on direct appeal. Following their convictions, Eccles, Miss Kelly, and Baldwin submitted imprints of their teeth. These were compared to the alleged bite marks on Stevie Branch's forehead that had not been mentioned in the original autopsy or trial. No matches were found. John Mark Byers had his teeth removed in 1997. You can't make this stuff up. After the first trial, but before an imprint could be made, he stated reasons for the removal are apparently contradictory. He has claimed both that the seizure medication he was taking caused periodontal disease and that he planned the removal because of other kinds of dental problems which had troubled him for years. In July 2007, new forensic evidence was presented. A report jointly issued by the state and the defense team stated, quote, although most of the genetic material recovered from the scene was attributable to the victims of the offenses, some of it cannot be attributed to either the victims or the defendants, unquote. A hair found in a knot used to tie up one of the young victims is, however, found to be, quote, not inconsistent with, unquote, Terry Hobbs, stepfather to Stevie Branch. And this is where Terry Hobbs comes in as a suspect. After weeks of negotiations, on August 19th, 2011, Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly were released from prison as part of a plea deal, making the hearings ordered by the Arkansas Supreme Court unnecessary. The three entered into an unusual Alford plea deal. Are these so unusual? I've researched quite a few cases with these. The Alford plea is a legal mechanism that did not technically result in a full exoneration for these three men. Some of the convictions would stand, but the men would not admit guilt. Baldwin was initially resistant to agree to this deal, insisting as a matter of principle that he would not plead guilty to something he did not do. But, he said, his refusal would have meant that Eccles stayed on death row. Quote, this was not justice, he said. However, they're trying to kill Damien, unquote. John E. Douglas, a former longtime FBI agent and current criminal profiler, has since said that the murders were more indicative of a single murderer, intent on degrading and punishing the victims, than of a trio of unsophisticated teenagers. Douglas believed that the perpetrator had a violent history and was familiar with the victims and the local geography. He stated in his report for Eccles' legal team that there was no evidence the murders were linked to satanic rituals and that post-mortem animal predation could explain the alleged knife injuries. He said that the victims had died from a combination of blunt force trauma and drowning, in a crime which he believed was driven by personal cause. A documentary film about the 1993 killings, West of Memphis, a film paid for and produced by well-known director Peter Jackson, was released in 2012, strongly suggested that Terry Hobbs, stepfather of victim Stevie Branch, participated in the murders of the three boys. It had already been speculated about. They also asserted that a second hair found on a tree stump near where the bodies were found matched that of David Jacoby, a friend of Hobbs. The filmmakers also noted that Hobbs had a long history of abuse, including an admitted assault on his wife and accusations of child beating and assaults on neighbors. To this mix of circumstantial evidence, the filmmakers included an interview with an aunt of Stevie Branch, Jo Lynn McCaughey, who alleged that she saw Hobbs doing laundry the night of the murders, presumably to clean the mud off of his clothes after killing the boys in the woods. The filmmakers also reported that a prized pocket knife owned by Stevie, one he almost always carried with him, was later found among Terry Hobbs' possessions. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, the filmmakers produced three young men who claimed to have been told by a nephew of Terry Hobbs that the fact that Terry killed the three boys was a closely guarded family secret. Whew. In 2013, what seems likely to be close to the true story of the West Memphis murders finally emerged in a separate affidavit signed by Billy Wayne Stewart and Benny Guy. This is all allegedly. On May 5th, 1993, according to both Stewart and Guy, Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, and two teenagers from a local trailer park, L.G. Hollingsworth and Buddy Lucas, showed up at his West Memphis home looking to buy some pot, which Stewart provided. While Stewart sold the two boys the pot, he noticed Hobbs and Jacoby kissing in a pickup truck across the street. According to Stewart, Hobbs was a bisexual with a preference for sex with young boys. Hobbs, he stated, had invited his own 10-year-old son to pool parties, invitations which Stewart insisted his son decline. He had to add some stereotypical gays are pedophiles stuff in there, which I'm very skeptical about. So who knows if it's true. Also, I'd like to preface that this story can be found online, and again, I am only relaying it here. I take everything with a grain of kosher salt, you know what I mean? What happened after Stewart sold the pot on May 5th was told to Stewart by Buddy Lucas in April 1995. Getting back in the pickup, Hobbs, Jacoby, and the two boys drove around town smoking pot and drinking whiskey before heading down a dirt road by the Blue Beacon Wood. At that point, according to Lucas's account, Terry Hobbs asked the two teenagers to get out and wrestle while he and Jacoby watched. While Lucas does not specifically say the wrestling soon turned into sexual activity involving him, L.G. Hollingsworth, and the two men, Stewart had no doubt that this is what happened, asserting in his affidavit that the lowered head and shame evident on the boy's face as he told the story made it clear that there was, quote, more going on between the boys and the men than what Buddy had just told me, unquote. It was during this likely sexual activity that Chris Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch appeared on their bikes at the wrong place at the wrong time, you think? Stewart says Lucas told him that Terry Hobbs screamed, "Get them little fuckers!" While Jacoby beat one of the kids, Hobbs ordered Buddy and LG to pull off his pants. According to the Stewart affidavit, Mr. Hobbs walked over to the boy that Mr. Jacoby had been beating and repeatedly bit the boy's penis and scrotum, then cut the boy's genitals. Terry Hobbs then announced to the other two boys that the other two boys had to be killed because of what they had seen, and Hobbs and Jacoby proceeded to do just that. The boys' clothes and bodies were gathered and dragged to the water, and their bikes thrown into the bayou. In addition to Guy and Stewart, Pam Hicks, the former wife of Terry Hobbs, and the mother of Stevie Branch, is among those convinced Hobbs murdered her son. Hicks launched a legal effort in March of 2013 to obtain additional evidence that might link Hobbs to the crime. As of December 21st, 2021, update, Eccles' attorneys finally got access to the evidence they believe can exonerate all three of these men who were accused. Eccles' legal team says it took a court order from the state to see the evidence at the West Memphis Police Department. They say the evidence is in good shape and well documented. Quote, "We were told the evidence had been destroyed in a fire," unquote, said Lonnie Sowery, a spokesperson for Eccles' legal team. Quote, "And then, lo and behold, we get to the West Memphis Police Department today, and all the evidence is cataloged, and it's there intact. Nothing was destroyed," unquote. The next step is getting the evidence tested using a new DNA technology called MVAC. Damien Eccles calls New York City his home now, and a lot of musicians and celebrities his friends since his release. He has published a nonfiction book about both his childhood and incarceration, Life After Death, which includes material from his 2005 memoir. All the men can be researched online, and like I said, this is a case close to my heart, and it's just unbelievable, even when I researched it, to find out all of the new updates on this case. So probably more to come. Thank you so much for listening, kind souls. As usual, I leave you with a Yiddish saying, and it certainly applies to the perpetrators of today's crime. Franzen soll essen sein Leib. Venereal disease should consume his body. Thank you and good night.